I'm having a quick chat with the composer Raymond Deane as the ICO are performing his atmospheric work, Embers. Raymond, I'm interested to know what inspires you to write music?
Wow, well, that is the $1 million question. You know, I'm kind of 70 years on this planet now, and I've been asked that question so many times, and I've never actually known how to answer it. I grew up in Achill Island in the far west of Ireland, where there was no classical music. I mean, I was obliged to learn the piano. Everybody in the family learned the piano, so. And my father had a couple of classical records, mostly vocal, sort of bits of Gounod's Faust and Carmen by Bizet. And I listened to these things and I liked them and I practiced the piano. And then we moved to Dublin, and I think I then had to spend 6 months without a piano because the piano stayed in Achill until my father was ready to follow us. And those 6 months were hell. I realized I missed the piano and I just became completely obsessed. I used to go into Walton's music shop in Frederick Street in Dublin, and they would let me play on their pianos very kindly. And I just became totally obsessed. And I think that obsession then kind of lingered. And as soon as the piano arrived, I didn't just want to play little bits of Mozart and stuff. I wanted to play my own stuff. I wanted to write my own stuff. And I think that's what gave me the initial impulsion. And I made that decision at the age of 10, you know, I'm going to be a composer. And I suppose, you know, I didn't realize the mistake I'd made for another half century or so.
Well, that's a really inspiring story to think. I kind of get this sense that there was somehow music inside you that had to come out.
Yeah, well, definitely music of all kinds was very important to me. But, you know, we're talking... in those days, it would have been show bands and things like that in Ireland. And I kind of liked all that stuff. And the Liverpool scene was just starting up, and I loved the Beatles. So yeah, music was kind of my link to the world in some ways.
Fascinating. It's so interesting. Now, when we think about Embers, can you tell me something about the inspiration for this piece specifically, and also something about the style of music that the audience will hear?
The piece was written, I have to say, this is 2023. The piece was written in 1973, which is 50 years ago. It's half a century old.
Wow.
And I was asked to write a piece for string quartet, for an ad hoc string quartet, run by a wonderful man called Charlie Maguire from a great musical dynasty in Dublin. And these people were not experienced in contemporary music. They were great musicians, but you know, they wouldn't have been playing much Boulez or Berry or whatever. But so I wrote this, what I thought was a very simple piece, and discovered then that it wasn't simple, that it actually explored areas that were quite strange and that kind of puzzled me and that very much attracted me. I called it Embers, not because of the Samuel Beckett play. The play suggested the title, but because the materials I was using were in themselves kind of familiar. There were, you know, little fragments of melody, nice harmonies and so on, but they were put together in a way that had nothing to do with traditional tonal music. And I thought that was interesting, and a lot of other people thought it was interesting. But I then thought, I wrote the piece, gave it to them, they played it. I then thought, right, I'm moving on now, I'm going to do something completely different. And I completely underestimated this piece. I thought it's just a student piece. Until about 20 years later, I did make a string orchestra version of it in the meantime. But then an English string quartet called the Duke Quartet came over to Ireland and did a tour, and they included this in their program. So I went around with them and I heard it, you know, plus rehearsals, I heard it about 6 times. And I thought, hell, that is... I didn't realize what a good piece this was. And in fact, subsequently, it is the most performed of all my pieces.
Wow.
And I can now, when I listen to it, I can hear in a nutshell, everything that I've done since then is somehow or other implicit in this strange little piece. It's very hard to explain, very hard to describe. So, I've spent half a century trying to live up to this one piece, which is quite a difficult thing.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated to understand how the piece of music stayed the same, but you've changed.
Yes.
And so, what is it like looking back on sort of 50 years of your life and hearing that music one more time?
Well, that is the crux of the matter. But it's also every performance of the piece that I hear. There seems to be something in this piece that lends itself to different interpretations, which I take to be a positive thing. It means that different musicians see and feel different things in it. Like I said, when the Duke Quartet played it 20 years after I had written it, they played it a lot faster than I had intended. And I remember at the first rehearsals thinking, well, do I want to go with that? Yeah, I do. That's the secret of the piece. It should be faster than I thought. And then I heard Gerhard Markson, great German conductor who was principal conductor with RTE for years. He conducted the string orchestra version in Music Festival in 2016, commemorating a century of Irish music. And he, on the contrary, played it incredibly slowly. And again, I went to a rehearsal and I thought, I can't allow that. That's impossible. It's a completely different piece. And then I listened through to it and I was amazed because it was wonderful. I loved it. So, I loved the way he did it. The audience was enraptured by it. And I loved it the way the Duke Quartet did it, a lot faster. It seems to be a piece that is infinitely, well, no, not infinitely, but highly adaptable, which is strange and interesting, I think. Yeah.
So when we think about these two amazing performances, sort of landmark performances of this piece, I'm curious to know, what are you hoping that the Irish Chamber Orchestra will bring to this work when we play it?
Yeah, well, of course, I've heard the Irish Chamber Orchestra already. It's on my YouTube channel. During lockdown, Thomas Zehetmeier conducted it, a recorded version. So I'm familiar with that particular version, but I don't necessarily expect to hear exactly the same thing again, because I'm hoping that in the intervening months, Herr Zehetmeier will have done nothing except think about this wonderful piece. And,
That's highly likely.
Yes, and he may give a completely different interpretation. I've no idea, and I'm not going to anticipate. I'm not going to say to them, I want you to do it this way, that way, or the other way. I'm looking forward to hearing what they do, which is nice. It's a nice way to be.
Raymond, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.